your average guardian.
Okay, so do y'all remember this? If I really think this setup can perform and has potential, why did I only give it a bronze in PvP? Don't worry, there's a reason. This is the reason. This setup is everything I'm looking for in a bow build. It has the lethality.
This is amazing!
It has the lethality of whistlers with way more. It has the lethality. It's pretty good. Alright, now that we've gotten that out of our system, let's look at what actually is going on here.
What? What the f-
The setup uses a precision frame bow named Wolftone Draw, as it's the only precision frame bow that currently has access to the perk Adagio. Adagio, like Kill Clip from Whistlers, provides bonus damage after a kill, but at the cost of reduced draw time. Normally, this is where I'd make a comparison to the previous Whistler's Whim review, but between that video and this one, Kill Clip has actually been changed. It now refreshes on kill, but at reduced damage, meaning it can no longer nail the one-taps. The only thing really keeping it worthy of a spot in my vault. But, much like the previous iteration of Kill Clip on Whistlers, Adagio pairs perfectly with Radiant to provide just enough power to land one-taps. The big difference between Wolftone and Whistlers being that in addition to having the one-tap capability, it also just feels great as a neutral weapon, meaning that it doesn't feel like a drag in between those one-tap payoffs like Whistlers did. That's the biggest issue I had when trying to get footage for Whistlers. It was just a slog to use at the best of times. Precision bows, however, have a naturally higher accuracy, which allows you to use the bow at significantly longer ranges with more reliability, keeping the raw strength of the bow intact. A small downside to this setup is that 10 resilience actually survives the combo, but that takes pretty significant building for any class except Titans, and even then, there's a few ways for us to build around that too. Thankfully, the only thing you really need on the bow is Adagio. I mean, I'm having a great time with this, and my roll's pretty terrible. Imagine what you could do with a perfect roll. But Adagio and a damage bonus only get you so far. In order to turn this into something that you can do reliably, you're gonna need a build. And while this isn't necessarily restricted to any one class, I personally found Hunter to be the easiest to utilize thanks to Acrobat's Dodge and the proximity knives. So that's what my recommended builds for you will be focusing on. In fact, most of what we're working with here can be mirrored across almost every build that I'm going to show you, so let's go over the basics first. On all of these, we're going to be using Acrobat's Dodge, Strafe Jump, Proximity Knives, and a Healing Grenade. Now, I know Acrobat's Dodge is the least popular dodge due to the long cooldown and more floaty animation, but this supports the one-tap potential by giving us not only another method of becoming Radiant, but being able to do so proactively or reactively after a kill, rather than solely relying on that knife. For the jumping grenade, feel free to salt to taste. I prefer the strafe jump in PvP simply due to the aerial correction, and while I like the healing grenade to be able to get back into the fight faster, if you have more success with another, go right ahead. Because mobility and strength end up being pretty vital stats to these builds, I had to make a cut to my recovery to meet the desired stats, so I personally opted to bridge that gap with the healing grenades. For the knife, technically any will do, but I personally love the proximity for specifically these setups. The other knives can work, but they're kind of all or nothing to use, and often require you to be fairly close to your target in order to use them correctly. Using the proximity knife allows you to prep a trap of sorts, able to set up the knife and then get your bow ready ahead of time, to get that 1-2 combo, and immediately have both Radiant and Adagio active at the same time. I'm using Knock 'em Down for the 2 fragment slots, and the utility of getting your knife back if it happens to get the final blow. On Your Mark offers you and nearby allies up to 3 stacks of better handling and reload when you get your precision kills, and maxes out immediately when you use a dodge. Considering precision kills are almost the entirety of what this build wants to do, this works great with the setup, and offers 3 fragment slots to boot. When discussing fragments, there's one that I consider vital and 2 that are borderline, with those final 2 being pretty flexible for whatever build-specific bonus you'd like to apply. Ember of Torches is a near must in order to use the proximity knife to become Radiant, and comes highly recommended in order to give yourself the best chance of getting Radiant when you need it. Both Benevolence and Solace are also huge with this setup, considering all the buffs we gain work in an AoE. If an ally happens to be close to us when we heal or during either Radiant activator, we suddenly get bonus cooldown, and our buffs for both Restoration and Radiant will last longer. But regardless of how you decide to build, you're going to need 3 things in order to make this work. Number 1 is Adagio, meaning you need to get a bow kill. Number 2 is Radiant, which can be done in a variety of ways. And number 3 is the perfect draw on your bow. which will require a little bit of practice with timing to be able to nail consistently, and what we really want here is anything that's going to help with any or all of those three. And you're spoiled for choice here really. Since you have two different abilities to help you become Radiant, there's plenty of hunter exotics that interact with those in various ways. I encourage you to try out some wild ideas. I had a couple in mind myself, but if you find a lot of success with the knives, consider a Phidias Spade to have 2 charges available. If you find yourself being extremely mobile, maybe try Frosties to really lean into it. My 3 favorites, however, in no particular order, were Caliban's Hand, 6 Coyote, and Oathkeepers. Each of these offers peaks of potential in their own way, providing incredible value on top of keeping that 1-tap potential. Let's start off with 6 Coyote, which simply gives us another dodge. With this, I focused on more of a team support setup, using the Acrobat's dodge to make myself and nearby teammates radiant preemptively, and constantly taking advantage of that Ember of Benevolence to keep my abilities topped off. While this, of course, is mostly to give ourselves the capability of the 1-tap, a few extra teammates having a damage bonus ends up going a long way as far as match success goes, and this build loves taking advantage of weakened enemies to turn an inch into a mile. I was expecting this exotic to work, of course, but it ended up having significantly more utility than I initially expected, and I was pleasantly surprised with how well it went. I added Ember of Eruption and Ember of Combustion as simply niceties here. They add loads of power to our super, and both add stats that we're happy to take more of. At the end of the day, these can be filled with whatever you'd like though. Next up is Oathkeeper, and this exotic does 2 extremely important things for this build. Because in addition to needing both Adagio and a damage bonus to get that 1-tap, you'll also need to nail the perfect draw with the bow. Now to somebody used to using bows, this isn't really that hard, but if you haven't had much practice, it can be quite the roadblock. Oathkeeper removes that requirement almost entirely, allowing you to always hold a bow at full draw with that perfect draw intact. Additionally, it also provides a massive plus 40 AE effectiveness with bows, and since we can fight from the air much better with these, a little fun fact. I personally didn't know this before the setup, but on Hunter you can fully draw a bow, then ability jump without breaking that draw. That allows you to take advantage of that additional AE more often. While this exotic doesn't provide any natural benefit to the ability portion, it provides so much utility to the bow itself that it makes knowing the 1-taps and that intermediate gameplay much more enjoyable. Our subclass setup looks pretty much identical, so there isn't much to say there. And our armor looks similar too, so just make sure you lean hard into mobility and strength. Finally, I also recommend you try Caliban's Hand. This allows for a more flexible, ability-focused build that'll let you use some different fragments and loop your cooldowns. This exotic makes your proximity knives a little more effective and adds a small scorch effect and gives bonus melee cooldown while you have a proxy knife somewhere on the map. Another little fun fact, it's worth stating that if you have your knife and you throw it and it's destroyed before it properly sets up, you actually get the full duration of cooldown anyways. It's a little bit of a silver lining. I'm going to touch on the subclass setup first, as a couple small changes go a long way here. Specifically, we'll be trading the fragments Eruption and Combustion for Singeing and Searing, which will give us more class ability and melee regen when dealing with scorched targets. Since our knife scorches opponents when using Calibans, this means that we get bonus melee energy and a fire spread if we defeat that target, or more class ability cooldown if they manage to get away. I use this build with the idea of attempting to spring a trap on your opponents. Setting up a corner or a wall now rewards you with that bonus cooldown on your knife while you wait, and it allowed for a little more capability to keep the dodge in my back pocket for if I really needed it. Heck, sometimes you can even use that scorch damage to track your enemy movements. It didn't happen very often, but it was much appreciated when it did. Additionally, if you end up changing away from the healing grenades, you can also use the combined scorch of the knife and grenades to help deal with a close-knit group of enemies, a general weakness of this type of setup. Hitting an enemy with something like both the knife and a fusion will apply more than 100 scorch, proccing an ignition that'll either heavily damage or outright kill any nearby guardians. And heck, the Caliban's knife itself can even do that if it gets the kill. One or two of those should be more than enough to convince the enemies to play a little farther apart, which plays significantly better for what we're trying to do with the bow portion of the build. Another reason I really love Caliban's is because it adds a little forgiveness when you use your knives. As much practice as I've had with this build, my knives can still be very tactical, and Caliban's gives you a little bit of bonus regen for another attempt. Use these as a jumping point, and feel free to go crazy with grabbing any other exotic that you think will work with this setup. You might come across something that I didn't even dream of working, and really blow my ideas out of the water. Now, as excited as I am to continue to use and recommend this build, I do have some bad news. This bow is the only one on the precision frame that has Adagio available, and it isn't exactly easy to farm. As of Season of the Seraph, Bungie added a whole bunch of older weapons to the Dares of Eternity, and Wolftone falls on a rotating schedule from there. It isn't an isolated drop, and it may take you more than a few tries to even get one, never mind with Adagio. It's worth it if you want to kill some time though, so I implore you to check both this out and any new precision bows we may see in the future with Adagio. It's an absolute blast. Hey Giga, do we have any clips left?
Guardian down.
Our build highlight this time comes from our Discord user Zero, who's put together a dang good look with the hats from the Spire dungeon. As per the usual, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, feel free to like and subscribe, and if you want to catch us live, you can find us over at twitch.tv/YourAverageGuardian. And with that, don't forget to stay awesome, y'all. We'll see you in the next one. Peace!